going to have a conditions-based withdrawal. All three of us support the idea of withdrawing from Syria and everywhere else when you can do it safely. It is in our national security interest not to withdraw at this time, in my view, because if you do so now, the Kurdish fighters, the Kurdish forces, will be decimated by Turkey, Assad, or maybe ISIS. It is clear to me that if you withdraw now, based on the conditions on the ground, Iran is a big winner inside of Syria. A corridor between Tehran to Lebanon will exist to funnel weapons to Hezbollah and other forces aligned against Israel. And most importantly, none of us believe that ISIS has been defeated. Now, 2 Democrats and 1 Republican saying the same thing. The war has not yet been won. The 2,200 in Syria are performing vital national security functions for us, which includes support for a key ally called the Kurds, and as an insurance policy against the rise of ISIS in Syria. And to me, we are all worried about the consequences of this decision regarding Russia, Iran, and Assad. So this resolution, the resolve clause, basically asks the president to reverse course, make any future decisions on withdrawing from Syria based on conditions on the ground after consulting with his national security team. We all share the same goal of withdrawing from Syria. We just want to do it in an appropriate fashion. And finally, as to the decision itself, I landed yesterday morning coming back from Afghanistan. And if anyone tells me that ISIS has been destroyed in Afghanistan, we're going to have a serious conversation. Our goal is to withdraw from Afghanistan based on conditions on the ground that will let us leave honorably and safely. This decision, I believe, has been made by the president, not with sound military advice against it. I think his entire national security team has expressed concerns about withdrawing now. As with President Obama, I advised him to listen to your commanders. A residual force in Iraq made sense to me. And I told him, I'm a Republican, you're a Democrat, but you'll get a lot of support from Senator McCain and myself if you follow the advice. Unfortunately, he did not. The rest is history. As to President Trump, I will help you any way I can, wherever I can. But because you're a Republican, I'm not going to ignore what I believe. I'm going to give you an honest evaluation. I was willing to support a Democrat if he followed sound military advice. I'm willing to fight a Republican if you don't. This is not about me. It's not about my 2 colleagues here. It's about our nation. And I don't want to hear any more about how much we love our troops. We all love our troops. And if you go talk to them, you will find out very quickly they understand why they need to be in Syria. They're all volunteers. They don't want to leave until the job's done. Do they miss their families? Yes. Have they suffered? Yes. Do they mourn the loss of colleagues? You better believe it. Are they willing to stay? Yes. They know better than anybody talking to you today why it's important to get this right. They have a high opinion of our Kurdish allies. I was in Syria just a few months ago, and I can tell you right now the Kurds have done a wonderful, fantastic job of being aligned with the United States, and our military advisors on the ground said, without equivocation, of all the people we partnered with, this has been our best, most reliable partner. So I can tell you in Manbij today, there are a lot of broken hearts of Americans who have looked our allies in the eye and say, we're going to stick with you. As to the decision by the president, I don't know where it came from, but it needs to be reconsidered. Ambassador Jeffries, our special envoy to Syria, a good man who is an ambassador in Iraq, just 2 days ago announced a commitment to stay until we got this right. I don't know how this decision was made. It literally came out of left field. It has rattled the world. You see North Korea flexing their muscle now about, well, why don't you leave South Korea before we do a deal? I can promise you that everything that happened in Iraq is going to happen in Syria unless we change course. And I can promise the president, if you will reevaluate this decision, you'll have a lot of support across both sides of the aisle. With that, I'll turn it over to Senator Reid.
Well, thank you, Lindsey. I'm honored to be with Lindsey and Bob. who are in the forefront of our consideration of all issues regarding national security. And echoing many of the things that Lindsey said, first, the hasty and disjointed manner of this announcement demonstrates that the administration is in disarray, and the president's ability to lead internationally is, I think, seriously eroded by this decision and by others. And simply because the president tweets that ISIS has been defeated is not the reality. We're not safer. He also continues to disregard the advice of his military, diplomatic, and intelligence personnel who have consistently warned against the action the president wants to take and is insisting that we do take. Just 2 weeks ago, General McKenzie, nominated by the president to be excuse me, the next commander of U.S. Central Command, said, ISIS probably still is more capable than al-Qaeda in Iraq at its peak, suggesting it is well positioned to reemerge if pressure on the group is relieved. And the president just relieved pressure on the group with this announcement. And even if the president's own advisors are talking about this action, we have to consider that all of them have talked almost in unison about the need to continue our support. And Brett McGurk, who has been our key point person in Iraq over many years, said basically, so obviously it would be reckless if we were just to say, well, the physical caliphate is defeated, so we can just leave now. I think anyone who's looked at a conflict like this would agree with that. And indeed, ISIS is still a very potent force, 10,000 to 20,000 personnel in Syria. And that's why our forces in Syria have been working closely with the Kurds, trying to train them up to take the role of American forces, in fact, to lead the fight, which they have. These forces are not quite ready to stand completely on their own, but they've made remarkable progress over the last several years. They've done it through their courage, their commitment, their ability to stand with and fight with our special operators, and it's something that we have to recognize. If we go through with the president's proposal, the most predictable event will be the reemergence of ISIS as a more credible, forceful entity, not only in Syria, but also in Iraq and in Jordan and surrounding regions. It'll also just completely recharge the tribal efforts and the battles that are going on within Syria. And it would be, in effect, a betrayal of these Kurdish forces. Senator Lindsey Graham has said that. I echo that sentiment. They have fought well with us. 2 or 3 years ago, when we were looking for a stable military force, very few were found. I don't think any of us believed it would be as this successful in terms of the Kurdish effort led by U.S. Special Operations Forces. If we forsake these forces, it will perhaps lead to a very bloody conflict with the Turks. They are poised to engage with Kurdish elements in Syria. Also, it will risk the security of our allies in the region, Israel, Iraq, and Jordan. I have no doubt that Assad and his minions will try to negotiate some deal and just send the message that ISIS, if you go east to Baghdad, you can do anything you want. Or if you go south to Jordan, you can do anything you want. That type of reaction would be extraordinarily detrimental, not just to Syria, but to Iraq and to Jordan. So we're looking at a serious risk of significant escalation. We're looking at a failure to grasp the simple lessons of history. You know, we did remove forces from Iraq, and ISIS constituted a fighting force that was so capable it overwhelmed the Iraqi forces and took Mosul and was on the verge of taking even more territory until we began a counteroffensive, which has been successful. But they're going to do the same thing going forward. We have to work very hard for a diplomatic solution. One of our key points of leverage in this diplomatic solution is our effective forces in Syria. Our special operators working with Kurds, working with Syrian Arabs that do not want to be minions of Assad. If we have that leverage, we can get to Geneva get to some settlement that will allow us, under conditions that are appropriate, to leave the battlefield. We're not there yet, and this action will undermine those efforts, I think, decisively. So I would join my colleagues in urging the President to consult with his U.S. military leaders, to take the advice of the experts, and to keep faith with our partners on the ground, and to reverse this decision.
Senator Menendez. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm pleased to join with two of the most significant national security voices in the Senate in common cause here. I think that Christmas came early to Russia by a series of decisions the President has made. One, obviously, on this withdrawal unilaterally and in a way that is without any strategy whatsoever, onto a whole host of national security questions that have been enumerated by my two colleagues here. Secondly, with the lifting of the designation of Rusal and other Russian companies at a critical time where I'm not sure that Deripaska's ability to influence those companies is still not a reality. And then thirdly, with our total lack of action as it relates to what happened in the Kerch Straits in Ukraine and what is happening with Ukrainian Navy personnel that are under arrest and being treated as prisoners without consulate abilities to visit. It's a trifecta for Vladimir Putin and a time in which it also sends a global message that of real concerns. And so, from my perspective, having listened to parts of Putin's 4-hour end-of-the-year news conference, I can see him already prodding President Trump about, well, I applaud you for leaving in Syria, but you also said that you should leave in Afghanistan. Why don't you leave in Afghanistan? You've been there 15 or 17 years. I can see him already prodding the President. This is dangerous. This is not just simply an error. It's dangerous. And let me just speak to that a little bit. Doing this without any strategy is foolhardy. And it puts U.S. security in the Middle East, including our ally, the State of Israel, at significant peril. We're entering a very dangerous time, as is increasingly clear to all on a bipartisan basis, including our international allies and our adversaries, that this president is incapable of addressing some critical national security challenges. Only in President Trump's parallel alternate universe has ISIS been defeated. There isn't anyone who would suggest that that's the reality at this point in time. This erratic decision-making indeed poses a threat to our national security interests. And so, the fact that the president tweets that Russia's not happy, I guess he didn't hear Putin's comments at his press conference. He's very happy, and he is thrilled with this abdication of U.S. leadership. I worry a great deal that we send a global message as well, as we are doing, if this is executed, as the president has announced, that we are going to abandon entities like the Kurds, who have been the most significant fighters for us, not only for their interests, but for our interests in Syria. And then the global message is, once the United States has finished using you, it will abandon you. That's a global message that we cannot afford elsewhere in the world. I also get concerned for our ally, the State of Israel. Iran has entered this fight in Syria in an unholy marriage with Russia. One, to prop up Assad, yes, but also to gain a tactical vantage point on Israel's northern border, where it has moved significant equipment and sophisticated fighters, as another vantage attack against Israel. To believe that we can outsource our allies' interest to Russia, and that Russia has an agency relationship with Iran where it can tell it to leave at it will, is ridiculous. Iran shed enough blood and national treasure in its purpose here. It's not leaving until its own interests are pursued, and that means it's not leaving for any time. So I said to Secretary Pompeo when he was up for nomination before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee as the secretary, I showed him a picture that came out a few months back. It's a picture of Rouhani, Putin, and Erdogan. And I said, what's wrong with this picture? And the answer to that question was the United States isn't there. That picture was those three people thinking and leading about the future of Syria, for which we have strategic national security and national interests. We weren't there. And now we're definitely not there if this action takes place. You cannot have significant diplomatic overtures without muscle that is backed up by the realities of having those troops there and assisting the Kurds at the end of the day. So I think this is a national security threat in its ultimate decision, and joined by the fact that we haven't rolled out any sanctions on Russia for what they've done in Ukraine since our original sanctions, most significantly what happened in the Kerch Straits, where we haven't increased U.S. NATO presence in the Black Sea, where we haven't announced any new security assistance for the Ukrainians. In each and every one of these cases, Putin has pushed and pushed and pushed, got what he wanted, and he has a very clear message that we're willing to advocate.
And there you were just listening to a press conference that was Senator Bob Menendez, but before that, Senator Lindsey Graham spoke about how he sent a letter to the Secretary of Defense urging them not to pull out of Syria, asking what happens to the Kurdish allies, and saying that there is growing bipartisan support to have a different approach when it comes to pulling out of Syria. He wants to see that, but not the way that the president has outlined. He wants to see conditions. Again, that was Lindsey Graham and Senator Bob Menendez. We're going to stay with this, actually, and want to hear what some of the questions the reporters have to Lindsey Graham. Let's listen in.
I won't get into conversations between Mattis and the president, but I will tell you what he told me. He thought that the time was not right to leave for all the reasons just expressed. Secretary Mattis, one of the most seasoned national security people I know. He's got a great team around him, the president does. He just needs to listen. He's very worried about the Kurds. He asked me, what are we going to do with these prisoners? You know, these are 700 approximately foreign fighters, and they're probably going to go back to the fight. I think he knows that. He told me without any hesitation that ISIS has been hurt badly, that the change in strategy to be more aggressive has paid off, but they're not defeated, and that a replay of Iraq is very likely. I talked to Secretary Pompeo. He understands that the conditions on the ground are not right yet for us to leave, that the peace process does only chance of bearing fruit if you have some leverage. And, you know, Geneva's the answer here. It's the same, you know, reconciliation is the answer in Afghanistan. The one thing I think they've all told me is that you may get peace between the parties in Syria, but ISIS will never be at the peace table. You may reconcile the Taliban with the government of Afghanistan, but nobody in the right mind believes that you're going to get peace with ISIS. What you do is you have partners that can keep the fight over there so it doesn't come here. We've been debating walls. Well, I can tell you can't build a wall between us and radical Islam in the Mideast, but you can have forward deployed presence partnering with others who do most of the fighting. And if you withdraw those forces too soon, it's like taking a wall down. So I am confident, I talked to Bolton yesterday, that this decision did not come based on advice from his national security team. It came from the president himself. He has every right to make that decision, but we're urging him to reconsider. And unlike Iraq, we have a bipartisan moment here. I'm calling on Senator Schumer and McConnell to join this resolution. We're signing up co-sponsors as quick as we can. We're all hoping to leave town. But this bipartisan effort to support a resolution urging the president to change course, I think there's a lot of votes for it. And to me, John's not with us, but I think Senator McCain would be pleased that all of our differences throughout the years about where to be and what to do and how to do it, that they're behind us, at least when it comes to Syria. John's voice has been consistent, whether you agreed with it or not. We need to do more in Syria, not less. It's going to get worse if you leave and if you do nothing. And as usual, he was almost always right. But now you have a bipartisanship I have not seen before. And I hope the president will take advantage of it. We will have your back, Mr. President, if you decide to change course.
Senator Graham, there's been some reporting that President Erdogan told President Trump that the Turks were getting ready to go into Syria to go after the PKK.
Yeah.
Is any of that reflected in any of y'all's conversations with some of these other national security?
I know our,
Due to the region, if that.
well, I'll let my colleagues speak here, but I also have been told by our national security team they're very distrustful of Turkey. If you spend any time with the Turks, they see the Kurds as a bigger threat than ISIS. Right. Now, the YPG elements have been listed as terrorists in the past, but I can only tell you what our military says. They have been the best fighters we have found in over a decade of fighting the war on terror. They're an indispensable partner, and their fate is very much at risk here. And there is concern that Turkey will move down. The only reason they haven't come down yet, we've been around Manbij. The day we leave, it's going to be open season on every Kurd who supported us, and they're going to get hit by at least three sides. Turkey is out to get them because they consider them a bigger threat than ISIS. Assad considers them an effective fighting force that he will want to destroy so he can keep his hold over Syria, and he will be joined in that effort by Iran. And finally, those 20 or 30,000 fighters, they're going to come back like a pack of wolves. So our Kurdish friends are in a world of hurt, and I guess what we're saying, that matters to the three of us.
Senator Graham.
Yeah.
Do you agree with this memo that Bill Barr wrote?
I'll talk to you about that later.
Senator Graham, just a quick follow-up on that. Given what was just asked about the Kurds, would you support fully arming the Kurds in order to protect themselves from Turkey?
I don't know what that means. Here's what I'm telling you. The Kurds are an effective fighting force partnered with us. They don't have tanks. They don't have airplanes. And they're not going to get tanks and airplanes in the next 30 days. So this idea somehow we can leave and give them the armaments and they can fight and protect themselves is not rational. We're not going to train a bunch of pilots to have a Kurdish Air Force in the next 60 days. So I think we all understand what's coming the way of our Kurdish friends.
I think another way to express this is basically one of the stabilizing, probably the most significant stabilizing influence in the area is the presence of United States forces.
Yeah.
When those forces come out, unpredictable instability and consequences will happen, almost inevitably. It could be Turkish attacks against Kurdish elements.
Again, just hearing from Senator Lindsey Graham urging the president to change his mind on withdrawing troops from Syria, saying that if you do it the wrong way, that it could be problematic for us here in the United States, and even saying that the Kurdish allies that have been fighting will then be up against Turkey, Assad, and then those 20 or 30,000 ISIS fighters that are still in Syria. Let's move on to other news. Democrats are already gearing up for what's expected to be a large field of presidential hopefuls in the 2020 race. According to the Democratic National Committee Chairman Tom Perez, Democrats will hold 12 presidential primary debates ahead of the general election. 6 will be held in 2019, 6 in 2020. The first 2 will take place in June and July of next year, with the final debate in April of 2020. Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. You are streaming CBSN. With 2019 just around the corner, some Republicans will soon have to decide whether they want to take on President Trump as a primary challenger. But in some early states like South Carolina, the GOP party is signaling it may cancel its 2020 primary in order to protect the president.
This comes as the Trump re-election campaign says it will merge with the Republican National Committee, another indication of party support for the president, ahead of what's expected to be a highly competitive race. So CBSN political reporter Caitlin Huey-Burns is the author of that CBSNews.com article, and she's joining us now to give us a little more insight. So I know it really was the Republican National Committee that gave the president his ground game in the last election. Clearly, they're not establishing a new ground game. They're getting together with the Republican National Committee, and the numbers in terms of his support may indicate why. So I'm just going to read these polls. This is the latest Gallup poll. 86% of Republicans approve of the way Mr. Trump is doing his job as president. That is 48 percentage points higher than his approval rating among adults from all parties. So clearly Republicans are firmly behind him. Is this basically why it looks like he's the candidate, perhaps the only candidate that will be in competition?
Well, we talk about his national approval rating being pretty low for a president, but his approval rating among Republicans is very high. Republicans, at least as we're talking about the base of the party, really like him and think he's doing a good job. So that, you know, on paper kind of scares away any potential real challengers from going against him for the nomination. But still, it's very telling that you're seeing some of these state parties make some kinds of moves to protect him from any potential primary challenge, and merging with the RNC is a way to streamline resources and staff, but also to say, look, we're having a united Republican Party front, because there are a couple things hovering over this administration. Certainly the investigations that we've been talking about for the past year. House Democrats will certainly be paying close attention to that and issuing, you know, subpoenas perhaps and going more into investigative measures, but also the economy still could remain a question mark in 2020. So protecting the president kind of signals at least a need to do that at this point.
Caitlin, in an interview with the Washington Examiner, the chairman of the South Carolina GOP said this, quote, "We have complete autonomy and flexibility in either direction, considering the fact that the entire party supports the president. We'll end up doing what's in the president's best interest." How unusual is it for a state to take this position?
Well, South Carolina has done this before. They did it in 2004 and by acclamation supported Bush at that time. So it's not totally unusual, but it is pretty newsy that they are saying essentially, look, he's the incumbent. He's the head of our party. We're just doing the inevitable. But, you know, you have other Republicans that I have talked to that say, well, if he is so well positioned, why not go out there and earn the votes and kind of show that you have earned the nomination again? So in New Hampshire, for example, there has been some moves by a couple of Trump supporters in the party to, you know, change the bylaws to make it so that you can endorse a candidate. And that's not what New Hampshire usually does. And there has been a lot of pushback to that, actually, including from the Republican governor, who says, look, New Hampshire always provides an even playing field, and we want to do that this time around. And if the president has support, let's let him show that to the voters. And New Hampshire's very interesting because even if some of these candidates who are or would-be candidates to challenge a president don't really have much of a chance, they can still damage him ahead of the general election. We saw that with Bush, for example, in 1992, challenged by Pat Buchanan, who didn't even win any primaries, but he came close and really put that challenge to then President Bush, and he, of course, lost his re-election campaign.
So when I heard about this, I immediately thought of the Democratic Party and the criticism that they received after the last election for, you know, backing Hillary Clinton and limiting the prospects for any other competitors, including Bernie Sanders, who emerged as, you know, a valued competitor. And I thought, geez, this doesn't sound good. You're not supposed to sort of eat your young, as they say. You know, what does this mean for other people who may be hopeful, who may be considering running?
Well, you know, you do have a couple people that have been talked about. We talk a lot about John Kasich, for example, the outgoing governor of Ohio, or someone like a Jeff Flake or a Bob Corker, senators who are leaving the Senate this year. There isn't really, it's not clear what the constituency is for that, because again, he remains pretty popular, the president, among Republicans.
Among Republicans, but don't they want others perhaps to win over some other people?
Well, remember, we just got out of this midterm election where Republicans lost a lot of support in the suburbs, and especially among women. And I talked to Kasich's campaign or top advisor yesterday, who said, look, we have a lot of time to figure out what to do, but they're also not weighing, they're not outruling an independent bid, perhaps. So we're kind of keeping some eyes on that. But again, you know, this is also a way for Republicans to shore up the support ahead of the general election, where they know there are lots of Democrats really chomping at the bit to take on this president, and they want to get ahead of that and really take advantage of incumbency.
Very interesting, Caitlin. Thank you.
Thank you.
And for more of Caitlin's reporting, be sure to check out her article on CBSNews.com.
The Trump administration is proposing changes that would make it harder to get food stamps. They revealed a plan this morning tightening work requirements for the food assistance program, which the Department of Agriculture oversees.
This comes after the House chose not to include measures endorsed by President Trump that would have required parents to work or get job training in order to qualify. More than 1 in 10 Americans are hungry or at risk of hunger. The USDA already requires adults without dependents to prove that they have employment to receive food stamps for an extended period of time.
In Money Watch, the Federal Reserve has raised the interest rates despite complaints from President Trump. They cite slowing growth as the reason for the change and a desire to avoid artificially propping up the economy. The announcement prompted stocks to drop about 350 points yesterday.
Altria, one of the world's largest producers of tobacco, will invest $12.8 billion in the e-cigarette company Juul. Juul will remain an independent company, but through the deal, Altria will help the company with its marketing. The e-cigarette company is under fire for aiming their products at kids and failing to disclose the health risks associated with their products.
And Johnson & Johnson has lost its motion to have a $4.69 billion baby powder verdict thrown out. 22 women and their families blamed asbestos in the company's baby powder for their ovarian cancer. Well, documents revealed Johnson & Johnson knew about the risk for decades, but didn't reveal that information to the public. The company continues to deny their products contain asbestos or cause cancer.
So we're going to take a quick break. We've got a lot more news ahead, though. You're streaming CBSN, CBS News, always on.